Let's say you don't have one of these. That's okay.
No, Steve, it's not okay. Excuse me while I go buy a papoose. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Alright, so you guys just met Steve Ouimette. You might not have heard his name, but if you have played any video game that centers around music, you've heard his work. From Guitar Hero all the way to the Just Dance series. When you grew up, you might have worshipped Slash or Jimmy Page. But for a guy like me who got into guitars because of Guitar Hero, Steve is a very legendary guy. So I would highly suggest checking out his YouTube channel, because it is unreal to actually watch him play some of his greatest creations ever, such as the Guitar Hero 3 version of The Devil Went Down to Georgia and We Three Kings. And that song right there is the reason why I had to buy a papoose. So as soon as I ran into his video that told all the secrets of how he got the cool tones from a Hartman octave fuzz to an EBow to this little papoose, I luckily found one of these at Guitar Center and sent a message to my rep that said, "Give me a free papoose," because I had enough rewards points up. But look at this cute little thing. It's got its own little hardshell case, and it's another tiny guitar episode. I mean, we've documented a whole bunch of these, from mini Les Pauls to higher-end mini Les Pauls. But this time, it's an acoustic guitar, but it's got a whole big history behind it that I didn't even realize when I had first purchased it. So apparently George Gruhn actually had a hand at helping advise this brand new company about making the papoose. So what is a papoose? You're probably curious. So it's essentially a regular instrument that's tuned up 5 frets higher than normal. However, it actually has a much wider nut width than normal. It's trying to mimic being at the 5th fret of a regular guitar. But you can see you actually have a very clear 14 fret access. So it's basically like somebody who wants to capo at the 5th fret of a normal guitar, but they needed more frets. Because if you did that on a regular guitar, you would have this much room, but this one, you get like an additional 5 frets essentially. So it's not necessarily just a tiny little guitar. It actually fulfills a whole different niche. But it also has a very unique, interesting offset sound hole in a paisley design. And you can check out Gruhn's video right here. He'll tell you the whole story. But I guess when Tacoma was first starting to become a manufacturer, they were just going to like produce guitars for other people under different brand names. But Gruhn kind of helped steer them in this direction, and the Papoose was the very first guitar that these guys made under the Tacoma brand name. Tacoma standing for Tacoma, Washington, because these were actually made in the USA. So first impressions, the size reminds me of a ukulele, except for it's probably about twice the size, you know, twice the depth, twice the width, but it really does just kind of feel like a tiny guitar in that aspect, but it's so deep, it feels all right. I think on a strap, this would just be a great little strummer. The neck itself kind of reminds me of like a 61 style SG, where it's really flat and wide feeling, almost a D shape, but it's got a little bit of a roundedness to it. I would definitely prefer this to be a bit more of a baseball bat for me personally, just hammering away some chords, but I could see how if you're just like a solo artist wanting to play this like busking on the street, this neck profile would be very good for that. It's got a very thin, apparently lacquer finish, if I heard Gruhn talking about that correctly, but the action is phenomenal so far, so I'm really looking forward to checking this little thing out. So besides the P1 Papoose, you could also find a Papoose Electric. They have the Chief model. There are a couple arch tops, the Road Kings, a pretty cool Thunderhawk baritone, as well as a bass version, and maybe a couple of other ones out there, including some mandolins. So our whole time frame here is very early 90s. We're talking like 1991, but this company was shut down in 2008 because it was eventually acquired by Fender. And to learn more about the history of the whole company, I would just suggest checking out Phillip McKnight's video. He's got hands-on experience with that. But as a too long didn't watch type thing, basically it got shut down due to various Fender acquisitions, and they were trying to consolidate guild and try to get people properly trained. Again, check out his video for the full story. Because when I bought this, I didn't realize that so many Nashville recording artists were using these. It's like a very well-kept little secret, these little Tacoma Papooses, because they sell for crazy money online, like $850 minimum nowadays. Here you can see some of the people who have famously used these or were endorsed by the company. But this thing is, it just seems to be so much fun. There's a reason why they've kind of become a cult classic. I wasn't even expecting to have any of this case candy. That's pretty cool. Nice little chord chart right here. And this was the only one that was available at the time when I had purchased it. It appears somebody's re-glued our bridge. Our pickguard's not exactly beautiful. but I just bought it because Steve used it and it's like, yes, that's cool. So I suppose to learn a little bit more about this interesting little beast, we should throw it on the workbench, get some fresh strings on it, figure out what's going on with this, and learn about its specs.
Inside our little Papoose here, let's take a look at this. So here's our Paisley sound hole that we were talking about earlier. It's a very familiar shape on guitars, but yet different at the same time. It's not so jarring and being offset, because most acoustics just have a big round sound hole right here. It makes it different. Now you can tell where there's like some picking wear right here because the player's pick was like catching the side of that sound hole, so that's kind of funny. But inside there, you're greeted with the word Papoose, as well as your model number, P1, and our serial number, but we'll take a look inside here in a second. But it appears what's happened to this top, the reason why we have this like lifting right here is because the top has sunk just a tad, and we do have a little bit of a belly to the guitar right here. And as I was telling you earlier, this bridge has definitely been re-glued at some point in time. Maybe not the cleanest work in the world, but hey, it was the only Papoose available for shipping at the time of my purchase. But I found this bridge design very interesting, so it doesn't actually use pins like most acoustic guitars. It's actually designed in a way that you need to take the ball end of the string, insert it sideways, push it down, and then it locks into place right here. Now, getting it out is a little bit of a pain, but it's an interesting horseshoe shape. So you don't have to worry about losing a bridge pin or not having the right utensil to take it out or getting it locked in properly. So I would say so far, I like that. And then despite looking like a typical spruce top, this is actually a cedar top. I don't think I've ever had a cedar top acoustic guitar before. What I really like is the side profile view because you have all that straight wood grain. It almost gives it like a herringbone binding effect. Almost, not exactly the same, but interesting to see nonetheless. This one definitely saw some use. I'm wondering if the case actually did that, like it came crashing down on it, because these things actually originally shipped in gig bags, so I think that case we saw, that was just custom purchased for this guitar. The tag says DAT cases, made in Canada. It's very similar in style to like the 2000s or late 90s Gibson TKL cases, as far as the handle and construction goes. It feels nice. I'd say it's in good shape, probably needs a new pick guard on it, but whatever. The body's about 13 3/4 inches long, about 14 if you count the strap button. The widest area is about 11 inches, and the upper bout about 7.5, and just slightly more than 3 inches deep, and roughly about 31 inches the entire way. But that's enough about the body, let's move on to the neck. The fret's polished up very beautifully, so that's going to be easier to do our We Three Kings bends, that's for sure. But something I noticed while playing this for a little bit is you got 2 double dots, and that annoyed me at first. Guitars that do that generally are just like not for me as far as that goes, but there's actually a very good reason as to why they did that. Remember, this is trying to emulate a guitar that has a capo at the 5th fret. So let's count it. 5th fret, 6th, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, you see what they're doing now. They're trying to make this look familiar to you, but they actually wanted you to know which one was the true 12th fret for this guitar by doing that. So that makes complete sense to me, and I love that. But as far as the actual scale length, the spec sheets call it 19.1 inches. But here's where the true beauty lies. What is the nut width? 1.85. Okay, so most guitars are ranging anywhere between 1.5 to a more modern 1.7. So they really are trying to mimic being up by the 5th fret of the other guitar. And I think that's probably the magic behind these. I mean, again, that's George Gruhn here. Apparently that was his advisory role with this one. And then by the actual 12th fret, it's 2.2. And as I was telling you earlier, 1st fret neck depth very skinny, 0.79. And at the 11th, only 0.86. So if you don't like skinny necks, you probably won't like this. Here's the neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. I mean, you can see that stays very consistent. It just widens up a tad, and I would almost say becomes a little bit more flat. The edges are rather sharp and not that comfortable in my opinion. And as far as the radius of the actual fretboard, you can tell it has a very slight radius to it, but it's very flat. I mean, it almost feels like there's nothing. On my gauges, it looks the closest to 16. As an edit here, while playing this later on, I found out why you want the neck to be so thin and kind of flat. It's for all the chords. The spacing and thinness just make it so easy to play them all the way up and down the neck. That's another thing that makes complete sense once you sit down and play it. Then here's our headstock. Tacoma. I like that wood grain streak in the mahogany wood right there. It makes it kind of look like a headstock repair, but it's not. And it's really hard to come up with a cool new headstock design that's not already been taken. And I'm not going to say this is the coolest one, but it works with the charm of this instrument. Just a little bit of a bump that gets tapered off. Basically half of a Gibson's headstock. But we just have these little button tuners here. They seem to work okay. And my nut was not glued down, so I'm not sure if that was replaced or not. But you can see the maple wood that caps off the truss rod cavity. Very similar to Gibson's construction as far as the truss rod goes. You can also see that at the bottom of the neck too. And the truss rod cover, it doesn't actually say anything on it. It just feels like a fiberboard material. Almost wood-like, but I don't think it actually is wood. But it gives off the appearance of being it. As far as the back goes, nothing too magical here. You just have two Allen keys that you use to take the neck off. Now, I would take it off to show you guys, but unfortunately, I don't have the right size one on my workbench right now. But no crazy comfort cuts or anything, just a very simple constructed guitar here, but it's all solid woods, and that's what made these things high quality instruments. Because sometimes when you buy a cheaper acoustic guitar, they have like layered woods and whatnot. So that was a selling point for these. Solid mahogany backs and necks that are single piece, by the way. It's no scarf joints here for our neck. Some guys might look down to the whole screwed on aspect of it, but it's also a solid cedar top, as we were learning earlier. But as we saw on the inside, we do have an acoustic preamp in here. Looks like we plug it in using the bottom strap button. And we do have another button right up here. Now, just in case this ever comes up for sale, this particular one has like a little bit of a gap right here in the joining of the two pieces of wood to create the sides. I don't think that's actually a defect or anything to worry about, but it is there. But something I found kind of interesting about the finish on the back is when I cleaned the neck, it turned into a semi-gloss because I was like really going to town polishing it because I just thought it felt a little bit uncomfortable. I kind of wanted that to happen. However, the finish on the top, I did the same cleaning process too, and yeah, you can see it like semi-glossed a little bit, but not a lot. So it's possible that they used different finishes for the different types of wood. I'm not sure. It definitely behaved differently to the polish anyway. These are just my clamps gluing the nut on, so pay no attention to that. But we can see our Tacoma branded tuners here and the Made in USA branding. Literally branded. And it looks like we got a couple of dings up here at the top of the headstock. I know what you're all wondering, do you have to tune it to A? Could you potentially tune this just to regular tuning if you just wanted a tiny guitar? Yeah, but you're going to want some really heavy gauge strings, very similar to our mini Les Paul experiment. But here's a brief idea of what that would sound like. But I'm going to go ahead and tune this one up to A, because I have a feeling it's going to stay in tune better then. Okay, inside our paisley hole. Here we can see the Papoose labeling here, right here, a little bit more clearly with our serial number. And what was floating around in here is actually a little battery pack. The Velcro hasn't held up very well over the years. It barely sticks at all, but that's how that works. But right now we're all the way at the bottom of the guitar. You can see how they've braced it with another piece of wood right here for the output jack as well as our strap button. So that has some sort of an apparatus somewhere around here. There it is. You can actually use that to adjust your tones a little bit. It's just a little bit tricky to get to. But right here what we're seeing is the cutaway. You can see some, looks like maybe glue seepage, but you can see how they kerf the sides. And then we can see a little bit of the bracing system down here. It's such a small body, it's hard to get enough room to actually see everything. Here you can see the top bracing. Looks like it makes some sort of a V-shaped pattern. Then what we're seeing right here is the neck. It's just kind of sloped off, and then that completely meets the body right down here. So that sticker is just on the side of the neck joining into the body. It's not the best look, but the best I could do. All said and done, this thing only weighs 2 pounds, 10.3 ounces. And I might say, hey, you've got your contour gauge. Don't worry, I teared that off. So let's go ahead and just have a little bit of fun with this. Nothing serious, just strum a couple of chords and see what this thing can inspire. Alright, so now that we know all about the Tacoma Papoose, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Now, the brand new strings take a while to stretch in, so I don't know if I can fairly assess this as far as how well it stays in tune at this point in time, but it was definitely starting to get better. Now, I was getting like some weird grounding hum, so I just ended up taking the battery out so it wasn't dangling around in there. I definitely need to order some new Velcro because it just ended up completely falling off. But I'm sure once I get this properly attached again, that'll be fine. But this is a great little musical tool. I always find if you get bored of what you normally play, try a different tuning out, and this guitar kind of helps you do that. It's basically like you remove your bottom E string and then all the rest of the strings are taking its place. So you kind of have like an extra string here. Kind of. That's not exactly what it is. But when you start thinking that way, it just kind of changes the way that everything sounds. So it's a great little musical tool for that. You kind of get some mandolin vibes. I'm sure it'd be good for some country style picking like that as well. But I certainly had a lot of fun checking out this Papoose. Maybe I'll do a cover of We Three Kings when I have some time to practice more. Man, he makes those bends look so easy. Maybe he's got lighter gauge strings than I do. But this definitely has that tone. Alright, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.